Human populations are by no means evenly spread throughout the world, especially as more than half of our planet's landmass is unsuitable for us to live on. Furthermore, people tend to gravitate towards living near fresh water sources and coastal regions, which has resulted in more than 95% of humans living in just 10% of the land available to us. There's a great variety within these regions too, and even if you think you live in a busy area, you might be surprised at how crowded some cities have become. Get ready to appreciate the space that you have as we take a look at the 15 most densely populated places on Earth. Number 15. Santa Cruz del Islote, 260,000 per square mile. Just off the coast of Colombia in the Caribbean Sea is an archipelago called San Bernardo. Made up of 9 coral islands, it's unusual in the way that it now has a 10th, which was completely man-made and has become one of the most densely populated places on Earth. Called Santa Cruz del Islote, which means the Holy Cross Islet. It's thought that the locals first began to build the island in the 1870s, when at low tide they built a platform from coral, stone, and any other debris they could find. The result was an island that measured 700 feet long and 380 feet wide, and there are now so many buildings on it that you'd be hard-pressed to find any spare space at all. Residents rely on nearby islands for facilities like cemeteries and recreation areas, but there's one school on Santa Cruz del Islote which has just one teacher. The island is, of course, a small piece of land, so there's only around 1,250 residents at any time. But because they're crammed into such confinement, this works out to be the equivalent of more than 260,000 people per square mile, which is almost 4 times the population density of Manhattan in New York. Number 14. Manila, 107,000 per square mile. Manila is the capital city of the Philippines. While it's the second most populous city in the country, it takes up far less space, and this has led to it holding the crown of being the most densely populated city in the world for several years. According to the history books, it was officially founded by the Spanish in 1571, but the site had actually been inhabited for at least 300 years by that point. It was already known by its name before the Spanish first reached the region. Manila translates to mean where indigo is found, and this refers to the historic presence of a number of plant species that have high concentrations of blue-colored dyes, which were highly sought after by civilizations across the planet. Generally regarded as one of the world's first global cities, functioning as a hub for trade across the Pacific for centuries, the city is now split into 16 different districts and continues to be one of the most rapidly expanding urban areas on Earth. With the main part of the city covering an area of just 16.5 square miles and accommodating a population of 1.78 million people. It means there's an average of 107,520 people per square mile. Number 13. Pateros, 94,000 per square mile. Pateros is a municipality that's within the wider metro area of Manila in the Philippines, but despite being the smallest in terms of the area it covers and its population, it still ranks as one of the most densely populated places in the world. That's because it's just 0.68 square miles in size, but is home to almost 64,000 people, giving it an average of 94,400 people per square mile. In modern times, it functions mainly as a commuter town for people working in Manila, but Pateros has a deep cultural heritage of its own. The name is believed to have its origins in the duck breeding industry, and a famous quote from a U.S. diplomat who visited in the 1800s said that he had never seen so many ducks together in one place. If the place sounds familiar, it might be because Pateros became the site of one of the main American encampments during the Filipino-American War between 1899 and 1902, and because it would be so fondly remembered by those that visited during the time, its name was taken for a city in Washington state. Today, Pateros in the Philippines remains intrinsically linked with duck farming and is particularly famed for the production of 2 Filipino delicacies, a boiled fertilized egg that's called a balot, and also a type of red salted egg. Number 12. Mandaluyong. It's amazing to think that one country could be home to the top 3 most densely populated urban regions in the world, but just to the east of Manila, in the Philippines, is a third conurbation where space comes at a premium. Known as Mandaluyong, it covers an area of just 4.2 square miles, but with more than 386,000 residents. This averages out to approximately 90,460 people per square mile. It's not quite known where the city's name originated from, but it's believed it's due to the fact that large numbers of luyong trees used to grow there, or that the topography of the region looks like huge rolling waves, which are called dalulong in Spanish. While there have certainly been people living and trading on the site the city's built on for at least 700 years, it was only officially founded in 1841, when Spanish rulers separated it from a larger, sprawling urban area. During the American occupation of the Philippines, the city, which at the time was called San Felipe Neri, became more important to the area, and it became a chartered city in 1907, which was when it decided to change the name to Mandaluyong. Number 11. Bnei Brak, 76,000 per square mile. The Israeli city of Bnei Brak is located to the east of Tel Aviv on the Mediterranean coast. Taking its name from the ancient city of Bnei Brak, the city in its current form was founded in 1924, originally as an agricultural settlement. Since then, it has rapidly expanded and is now an important center for Judaism. With a population of just under 205,000 people, as it covers an area of 2.7 square miles, this means it has a population density of around 76,000 people per square mile, making it the fourth most densely populated city on Earth. Because of its agricultural roots and subsequent reliance on factories for employment, Bnei Brak became one of the poorest cities in Israel. But in recent years, there have been a series of projects aimed at turning these fortunes around. This included the development of a business district, planned to have 15 office towers, which is still under construction, and significant investment to try to attract new corporations to the city. As with many other places where so many people live in such a small area, the city has had to quickly adapt to its population growth, and this has struggled to provide education and other facilities for all of its residents. Currently, it continues to grow by between 2 and 3% per year in terms of the number of people that live there, while having little room for expanding the city limits, which has led some to call for stricter controls to prevent it from becoming too overcrowded. Number 10. Dhaka, 75,000 per square mile. As the capital city of Bangladesh, it's no surprise to learn that Dhaka has a large population and is actually the 9th most populous in the world. But what is unusual is that these residents live in a relatively small area, meaning it's also the 6th most densely populated city in the world. Amazingly, Dhaka's almost 9 million residents are spread across just 118 square miles, which averages out to approximately 75,290 people per square mile. The reason why this has happened is that it has long been a financial and trade hub of the region, and people who originally settled on the site simply couldn't have predicted how lacking in space it would prove to be as it expanded. The area has been inhabited for more than 1,000 years, but really began to establish itself as an important place during the Mughal Empire in the 17th century. It was during this time that it became a provincial capital, with it officially being founded in 1608, and it continued to grow since then. It became one of the richest and most influential trading cities in the world and was decorated with lavish gardens, mosques, palaces, and forts to impress traders when they first arrived in the country. This led to it being known as the Venice of the East, and despite it being so populated now, there remains a rich historic heritage, which means it's one of the most popular tourist destinations in the region too. Now classed as a mega city, Dhaka is home to countless international corporations and organizations, but despite being positioned on flat land or on the Ganges River, there's very little room for it to expand outwards to accommodate the increasing number of people wanting to move there. Number 9. Port-au-Prince, 70,000 per square mile. Located in the safety of the Gulf of Gonave on Haiti's west coast, the country's capital city, Port-au-Prince, has been an important trade center in the Caribbean for hundreds of years. The city was officially founded when the country was under French colonial rule in 1749, but the area has been inhabited for far longer by the original communities that lived on the island. Unusually, Port-au-Prince has a design that's said to be similar to an amphitheater, with the commercial and financial districts on the flat ground at the water's edge, with residential districts on the uneven and mountainous terrain that surrounds it. And the increasing financial difficulties the country has faced has meant that more than half of Haiti's total population now lives in the city, albeit a large portion of which live in slums. This makes population estimates tricky, but it's thought there are around 1 million people living in the city across an area of just 14 square miles, which gives an average population density of 70,950 people per square mile. It's this high density, along with a large number of poorly built houses, which helped to explain why the earthquake that struck the country in 2010 was so destructive. More than 230,000 people are believed to have lost their lives in that tragedy, and and it's led to calls for a plan of action to be put in place to try to spread the population out across a larger area, both to reduce the dangers of any future events and to try to improve the quality of living for everyone. We are constantly adding more people to the Top 5's production team to bring you all the best content. Be sure to subscribe with notifications on and hit the like button. Number 8. Levallois-Perret, 69,000 per square mile. The small town of Levallois-Perret, which is just a few miles from the center of Paris, is one of the most expensive suburbs of the city to live in. But even if you can afford to live there, don't expect to have much space to yourself. It holds the title of being the most densely populated town in the whole of Europe, with 64,379 people crammed into an area of just 0.93 square miles, which gives an average of 69,190 residents per square mile. Originally, there were 2 villages on the site, Villiers and Cruz, and while these were incorporated into a larger commune during the French Revolution, it became clear during the 1860s that it had become significant enough to be recognized as a town in its own right. It soon became where a number of companies located their factories, including the Eiffel Company, which means Levallois-Perret was the place where the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty were built. While the historic companies have now long gone, it's still home to the headquarters of several cosmetic and automobile manufacturers, which provide a large number of highly paid jobs, which is why so many people want to live there. It's because of this and the town's association with beekeeping that the coat of arms for Levallois-Perret actually includes images of bees, a gear wheel, and a perfume diffuser. Number 7. Karachi, 65,000 per square mile. Having by far the largest population of any place in the world that also has a high population density, Karachi is the capital city of the Sindh province in Pakistan. It's the country's largest city and is ranked as the 12th biggest in the world. But what makes this all the more impressive is that it only covers a land area of 228 square miles. With a population of almost 15 million people, this means it has an average of 65,340 people per square mile. To put this into perspective, Karachi covers slightly less land mass than New York City, but has almost double the number of people living there. Located on the coast of the Arabian Sea, Karachi is vital to the Pakistani economy and is responsible for generating more than 20% of the country's GDP and more than a third of the tax revenue. With the country's 2 largest ports within the city boundaries as well as the busiest airport, 90% of the international companies headquartered in Pakistan are based in Karachi, and it's one of the leading trade and commerce centers in the region. It is also a place with a rich heritage, having been inhabited for thousands of years since the Stone Age. So even though the city we see today was only officially founded in 1729, it's believed virtually every civilization in history that had dealings with this part of the world would have known about Karachi. Number 6. Kolkata, 62,000 per square mile. As the 7th most populated city in India, Kolkata, which was known during the British rule as Calcutta, is only 50 miles from the country's border with Bangladesh and is the main commercial hub of eastern India. It has a huge economy, being home to 9,600 millionaires and 4 billionaires. And with almost 4.5 million residents across an area of 71 square miles, it has an estimated population density of 62,950 people for every square mile. The history of the city is somewhat controversial, and this means there's no longer anyone credited with founding it. On the site where the city now stands, there used to be 3 villages. When the British arrived in the late 17th and early 18th century, however, they began to build a huge fort and combined the villages to create a city by 1773. Despite being 126 miles from the sea, it was a perfect place for a trade hub to be built because of its position on the Hooghly River, and remains the oldest operating port in all of India. As well as being a major financial center in the Bengal region, Kolkata is also now a major cultural hub, including being home to Tollywood and a sporting venue too. Number 5. Saint-Josse-ten-Noode, 62,000 per square mile. The Brussels capital region of Belgium is split into 19 municipalities, including the city itself, but it's not the central urban area that's the most densely populated, but a little-known municipality called Saint-Josse-ten-Noode. Named after St. Judoc, it used to be a place full of elaborate, stately homes. But when more and more people started moving to Brussels, it was one of the first nearby regions to begin to urbanize. This caused a split between the residents, with the poorer ones being forced to share very little space between themselves, while the richer residents retained their wide open spaces. But everything changed in 1855, when more than half of the land of Saint-Josse-ten-Noode was annexed to become part of the city of Brussels. The mainly poor parts were left to fend for themselves, and since then more and more people have arrived to call the place home. Now covering an area of 0.44 square miles, there's an estimated population of 27,548 people, which gives an average population density of more than 62,500 people for every square mile, making it easily the most densely populated place in Belgium and also in Europe outside of France. Number 4. Kathmandu, 61,000 per square mile. Kathmandu in Nepal is one of the newest capital cities in the world, having been only classified as a metro city in 1995, but it's a place that's been inhabited for almost 3,000 years. That's because the vast majority of the country is made up of mountains and inhospitable terrain, and Kathmandu's position in the Kathmandu Valley makes it one of the only places in the region that's capable of supporting such a large community. Covering an area of just over 19 square miles and with around 1 million residents, its population density is 61,960 people per square mile, and it's still growing at an estimated rate of 4% each year. It is the financial and cultural center of the country, famed for its stunning architecture and important tourist destination, particularly for those visiting the Nepalese Himalayas. The city is unusual in that it's at an elevation of 4,600 feet above sea level, and rather than having one river flowing through it, it actually is split by 8. The combination of large population in comparison to the city's size, as well as the geography of the region where it is, in a naturally formed basin, has led to serious concerns about the air quality for residents. It's regularly measured at having almost 5 times the amount of pollution that's regarded as being safe by the World Health Organization, and accounts for 1/4 of the country's deaths due to poor air quality each year. Number 3. Malé, 59,000 per square mile. The Maldives is one of the most popular tourist destinations in the world for those looking for a peaceful and relaxing vacation. But for the residents of this archipelago, things don't necessarily feel as spacious. One of the problems of building a city on an island is that the space is absolutely limited. And once you use all the land up, there's simply nowhere else to go. And that's exactly what's happened in the capital city of the Maldives, which is called Malé. Built on the central island of Malé, along with 5 surrounding islands, the city takes up every bit of land that could be built on. As it's the center of the country's economy, around 1/3 of the total population of the Maldives lives there. And the island has always been the focus of activity in the Maldives throughout history, having formerly been the site of the walled castle of the king. Today, the 2.2 square mile city has a population estimated to be around 133,400 people, which averages out to the equivalent of 59,570 residents per square mile, by far the highest of an island-based capital city in the world. Number 2. Guttenberg, United States, 58,000 per square mile. The town city of Guttenberg is in Hudson County in New Jersey, and despite being one of the smallest municipalities in the U.S., it's easily the most densely populated region. It's actually only 4 blocks wide, but because it contains 3 tower blocks known as the Galaxy Towers, which accommodate for more than 1/5 of the town residents, it has a total population of 11,481 people, and you can drive through it in less than a minute. Spread across a land area of just 0.19 square miles, this gives a population density of 58,650 people per square mile, and when you're there you can certainly feel how crowded it is. Guttenberg began as a farm, but after the land was sold to developers from New York, it had turned into a town by 1859. Its proximity to the Hudson River always meant it was a popular place to live, but the construction of the Galaxy Towers in the 1970s was what saw the town's population numbers really explode. There are now more than twice as many residents as there were before they were completed. Number 1. Kowloon Wall City, 5 million per square mile. It's no longer there anymore, but between the end of the Second World War and 1993, when it was demolished, the Kowloon walled city was the most densely populated place on Earth to have ever existed. Located in Kowloon City in Hong Kong, it used to be a Chinese military fort, but following World War II, when Hong Kong was taken over by Japanese forces, the walled city became filled with people who couldn't find anywhere to live elsewhere, and found themselves in what essentially was an enclave, with neither Chinese nor British authorities taking responsibility. This meant that the population numbers continued to increase, and the walled city became a haven for crime syndicates without any fear of reprisals. full of brothels, unlicensed gambling rooms, and drug dens. It was run by the triads for decades, with police only ever daring to venture inside in extreme cases. At its peak, the walled city had more than 50,000 people living there, which, in a place that covered a land area of just 0.01 square miles, gave an average of 5 million people per square mile. To accommodate all the people, the buildings kept being built taller and taller, but things couldn't go on like this forever. To prevent escalating crime and serious safety concerns, the Kowloon walled city was eventually completely demolished in the 1990s and was replaced by a city park. Watch our binge-watching playlist if you'd like to watch all of our most popular top 15 videos. Grab a drink, grab a snack, and get ready to binge.